Day 4, we've got 1 week done of 4 weeks, so we're 1/4 of the way. Actually, just a hair further because one of the days, Memorial Day, we don't meet. I'll jump around here just a little bit. You should be able to access your Palo Alto course, the Foundations course, the first one. And you should still have access to your AWS course. We'll start referencing those a little bit next week and quite a bit on Thursday of next week. So you need to have those. We talked about making sure you don't confuse hashing with encryption. In fact, I could use a different color here. Don't confuse hashing with encryption. We talked a little bit about VPNs and some of the things we're going to be setting up and doing some lab work with later on. Talked a little bit about learning. You know what you know, and we're more concerned of looking into areas where you can expand your knowledge. Okay, a lot of terms, but what we're doing right now is we're building a sense of a foundation. And we learn about something, then we add to that a little bit, okay? And how we view that. We talked about data to information, how we represent it, the types, and then we've added to that how we classify it. These principles and different ways to approach looking at security is a really sound way to do that. We talked about SneakerNet. I talked a little bit about Metalcraft, an example there. The lab work we're currently working on is this work, which I'm going to call the Linux Secure Environment. It follows a little bit a couple of the labs, like the lab out of Chapter 2 and the lab out of Chapter 3, but the authentication part we'll talk about here at the end. Passwords, access, and use. We finished up Chapter 2, standards. We have guidelines that allow us to develop standards. We have standards to follow so we can say that we're doing this, 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 and this. A couple good organizations to look up their websites, NIST and NSA, CSS. Guidelines are kind of like a term used a lot, best practices. I gave the example, you can get ISO standard, some verification, which then you can distribute that out to your clients and so forth, saying we meet these particular standards for quality or whatever it be. And these also allow us then to build procedures. We have some guideline, best practice to follow. We need to fit into a standard, and then we can build the procedures to fit our company. We went through the cybersecurity domains. I spent a little bit more time on asset management, talked a little bit about compliance. These are at the end of the chapter, and we will reference those. We'll reference those again later on. They give you a good groundwork for building your security policy. In fact, all of your security needs. They kind of a checklist to make sure you cover everything. Here, what we did was we split up. People did a little research on malware. I'm not going to go through all these terms. These are terms from the curriculum, plus there's, you could add to those with some current information. These, what we should be aware of, basically what all of these are. We talked about, Sam and Skylar talked about social engineering, and when they did that, a lot of this information related back to that. Denial of service, Jacob and Carter gave some good examples of denial of service. We're talking about availability or taking that away. And then Gage and Matt talked about scripting and coding and a couple different areas, and they looked up some current definitions and talked about how you design a script or how you code a program can have lots of repercussions on the security, depending on where you use those. Especially this was a lot of examples on the web. This is was a follow-up. We talked about. I didn't add a whole lot. I added a little bit about some of the things they mentioned. There were some things in the you could grab out of the chat. So yeah, talking about if you wanted to check on some of this, you know, DOSs have gone up a lot this quarter, or some UDP, and I didn't spell that right, but it was in the chat. Some of the things they talked about. I reviewed policies. We talked about authentication, authorization, and accounting, passwords, access control, and acceptable use. So we split into groups. You know, the people that were available today. And then they picked a machine. You know, each group picked one of the machines, Linux machines, and they start working on this. Okay, so they picked a machine, they're setting up a password policy, they're going to set up a shared location. It's similar to the lab that they were to do in class. Eventually they need to build backup, access to work server 3. I changed those passwords. The whole thing, the whole environment's kind of like a sandbox. We're communicating through the DMZ. The only way into the sandbox is to work server 2 using SSH. So later on we'll do some Nmap work. So to wrap up, you need to wrap up chapter 3. Those CompTIA Security Plus objectives, you want to go through, mark the ones you really know, strike through, you know, highlight the ones you really know, strike through the ones you really don't know, and kind of leave the rest of them blank. It's really good for you to go through, thinking maybe down the road you'll take the Security Plus certification. Monday we're in chapter 4. Yeah, we talked about some wireless security, and we'll talk a little more about this on Monday. So when you and then yeah, be backing up your machines for your Linux and secured environment. Let me know which IP so I know which machine, and a couple passwords. Eventually you can build an administrative account on those machines. That is it. We got 1 week in the books, 3 more to go.